home and forgetting to bring it back. So we now are a research collection, and we are over 73,000 items and climbing, one of the world's major popular culture collections. We are most fortunate in that the staff are assisted by the Friends of the Merril Collection, chaired by Chris Szego, and vice-chaired by Lady Green, Mary Armstrong, and by numerous other members of the Friends Executive who are here. And what they do is they organize our events. So this is the first Gay Pride event for the Merril Collection. We're all pleased to pieces that you could come. I just feel obliged to mention that we're open 10 to 6 Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Saturday. A great place to come when it's hot or any other time. And if you like science fiction or fantasy or horror, everything you've ever wanted to read is here in one place. Now, the Friends sponsor a great many events. We're trying to hold them down to one a month, but they're very high energy. So I'm just going to mention October 5th, we're having a party to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who. Lance Parkinson will be the guest. It will be in this building in the basement. Watch our webpage or contact the collection for more information. November the 6th, the writer Terry Brooks will be here. And November 28th, Shannon Maguire, who both writes and sings film, will be here, courtesy of SF Ontario, the local science fiction convention, and they're welcoming us to her for the evening. And our distinguished guests, and I'm going to turn you over to Chris Szego, who will explain everything.
I'm going to try something first, okay? Can you hear me without the microphone? You guys all okay without the microphone? Wait, we're saying yes, we're getting yes. How about yes, put your hand up. Not so much put your hand up.
Speak loud.
Okay, what we're going to try to do, to start with anyway, is to just project. You can wave and tell us to be a little louder, just because we only have the one mic and it might be a little difficult. My name is Chris Szego. I'm the manager of Back to Phoenix Books. I'm also the chair of the Friends of the Merril. And I'm really glad to see so many of you out here tonight on such a steamy, unpleasant evening. But we're here to talk about LGBT issues in science fiction and fantasy in SFF. It's a very broad topic. We're going to start with just basic panel discussion, and then we want to have some time to have questions from the audience. So first I'd like to introduce our panelists. On the end, Chris Butcher. He's the manager and one of the buyers for The Beguiling, one of Toronto's great graphic novel store. He's a co-founder of TCAF, the Toronto Comics Arts Festival. He is quite an influential blogger in the comics world, and he has also done it in the past a lot of freelance comic work. So that's Chris Butcher. Next to him is Gemma Files. She is an award-winning horror writer. She's a short story writer and a novelist, a journalist and a critic. A number of her stories were adapted for the television series The Hunger, and she is currently working on her fourth novel. Right next to me is J.M. Frey. She's a science fiction and fantasy author. She's a fanthropologist and a pop cultural scholar. She is also a voice actor and a model, and her debut novel, Triptych, was nominated for 2 Lambda Awards. So, Jess. You can call me Jess. Okay, so Jess, Gemma, Chris.
Gemma's one of on the cover.
Yes. All right. So first up, we've got a really big topic, just saying LGBT issues in SFF. It's really big. What I'd like to start with, just to start on a high note, is I'd like to get each of you, we can go along and do this, if you can pull up one issue, topic, story that was really positive in the past year. Whether that past year is from last year to this year or thus far this year. Can you think of one? Because we'll get to the bad news, because there's going to be lots of it. But I'd like to at least, let's see if we can start on it. Whether it's something small, something big.
I'll go
yeah,
first.
Please.
The best thing that I encountered this year, and I was really surprised by it, and I think that my surprise said more about my reaction to the industry than otherwise, was there was a survey book put out this year called No Straight Lines. It's by a guy named Justin Hall. He's a comics artist. And he did a survey of the last 40 years of queer comics, excluding pornography, which he felt could be its own volume, and probably will. And he put this book together to show that there is this history of of representation of LGBT representation in comics, and it is good and it is worth looking at. And I always get these anthologies with a bit of a feeling of dread because it's like we had to really reach to find something that was gay. But this was the first time that I had read a book like this, and I thought, this belongs on every bookshelf. This is a fantastic overview. Every piece in here is really either really good or a wonderful representation, you know, of what it's trying to accomplish, regardless of my personal tastes. And it was so good it sold out in under a year, which they had printed, they said, for like 3 years, and it sold out right away. And they're doing a softcover release that's unfortunately going to miss Pride, so we don't have any copies. But it'll be out in August, and I think Glad Day still has copies. I highly recommend it. So yeah, that was the one thing where it was like, wow, there is this body of work in comics now that is representational, that is of high quality, that I don't feel kind of embarrassed or about recommending to people, and that was wonderful to see.
That's excellent. Yeah, similarly, the one thing that springs to my mind is actually also comics related, which is that when the New 52 thing happened at BC, like it or hate it, and a lot of people hate it, one of the things that I was so happy about was that one of 2 titles that did not get screwed up was Batwoman. And, you know, obviously somebody had taken somebody aside and said, you know what, Batwoman is one of the best fucking things we've done in the last 10 years, so let's not be idiots. It's like, let us not do what everybody thinks we're going to do and take this as an excuse to get rid of the lesbian. Instead, let's just keep going at it. So, yeah, and I'm really, really happy to see that.
And that story is really great too.
Yes.
That was another one that I was like, oh man, I'm not looking forward to it. And
Yeah.
it really surprised me.
Oh.
Continuing to build and grow, it's fantastic.
Yeah, King.
All right, Jess.
Mine's not something specific. I've noticed in the last 12 months, there's just been a bit more of an accrual, I guess, of naturalization of queer relationships on television, in SF television. So like Jenny and Madame Vastra and Doctor Who, and the couple whose names I cannot even think of right now in Defiance, and just all of these wonderful, and Teen Wolf, where Styles I think is canonically bisexual.
No, no, that's Danny's canonically gay.
Almost canonically.
Yeah. Danny is canonically gay. Styles last night became canonically bisexual.
See, Tumblr doesn't lie. It's true. Everything I know about Teen Wolf, I know from Tumblr. I don't actually have cable at my house.
Yeah.
But, and I think to me, I love the kinds of stories where it's not like, oh my God, Johnny has 2 mommies. Let's have an entire episode about the gay issues. It's just like, no, Johnny's just got 2 mommies, and that's all there is to it, and moving on. And Doctor Who's always been quite good for that, but I always was a little bit queer baiting. But I love that a lot more SFF is on television. It's just being like, nope, this is a natural relationship. Deal with it.
All right. All right. So having braced ourselves a little bit with the good news, what are some of the biggest problems that have come up recently?
The Lambda Literary Awards eliminated the bisexual category
Okay.
completely.
Wow.
Yeah,
When
we talked
was
about
that?
bi erasure this year for the awards. So the category I was nominated, one of the 2 categories I was nominated for last year, they erased it.
Okay.
But on the other side, the bisexual writers of New York held their own award ceremony. So that was it.
Gemma, do you have?
It's always about representation, and it kind of amazes me that we still have moments like, for example, Shauna McGuire on the blog the other day saying that someone had written her a very long email saying, you know, I just don't understand why you have to be such a gay lobbyist. Why you have to lobby so hard and put gay characters in everything. And she was like, you know, they'd still be there even if I didn't tell you they were gay, right? You know, it's like, I actually loved her attitude because she was like, well, let's not pretend that I'm unbiased in this because, let's face it, I have a bit of a stake in putting lesbian and gay and bisexual characters and queer characters and trans characters and queer characters of all types in my in my stuff. And I think in a lot of ways, for most people, certainly for myself as well, it really boils down to you write what you want to see, you write what you want to read, you write the world that you want to see. But better yet, the world is like that anyways. So in fact, just not telling people that that some of your characters are queer does not make some of your characters not queer. And I really love it that people are front and centering that, but I hate it that people are that straight people with whom I am allied, for Christ's sakes, that straight people are constantly being all like, why are you up in my grill with these gay characters? What's that about? It's like, I don't know, representation.
Continualization of it. Chris?
I don't know that there's anything major enough in the negative to really sort of get my goat. I see just, it's like a death of a thousand cuts thing where there's so much progress being made on so many fronts, but there's also just as much pushback on so many fronts. And I think if anything, the major story that does have a negative component is that there's been a lot of entrenchment over the last year and a lot less discussion because everyone's feeling really threatened. And I think that's neither good or bad. I think maybe it's something that just has to happen, and we all have to sort of work through it. But yeah, I feel like the tone of discussion, and I think the biggest one was Orson Scott Card.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Yeah,
was that seismic in the comic world? I mean,
yeah, totally.
The book world is a slight remove. I mean, we are aware of it. But,
well, when that was happening, there was stuff coming out with his name on it, and then there was stuff that was solicited where he was supposed to start a new Superman series that was just he ended up being removed. Well, he didn't write the first issue anymore, but no one is seeing that as a victory on either side. Yeah, I think Orson Scott Card is really endemic of this huge problem. It turns out that not everyone is as open-minded and happy with the future in science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction as you kind of hope that they would be.
Yes, they're writing us over.
Well, there you go. Maybe that's the world that they are writing. The future doesn't have gay people in it.
Mormons.
That's yeah. And I think and you sort of look at it and go, well, that's in the past now. But there's that Ender's Game movie coming up that is only going to make this.
Did you hear Universal has removed him from as much of the publicity docket as they can?
Yes.
They're like,
that it won't.
yeah.
Like that is not going to be a quiet
Yeah.
discussion
No.
in the Ender's Game film.
And it should be.
And it's going to be it's going to really galvanize both
Yeah.
people on both sides of the issue. And it's just, man, that's a tough one. That has to face that like day in and day out.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest negative for me is that it's just weird, especially as someone who's a teenager.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah, that broke my heart because I read his work before.
Yeah.
Actually, not because SF, just his fantasy, but I read his work before I knew anything about him, and then it's that moment where you're like, oh.
I still remember when Dan Simmons, who I've met, and it's a wonderful gentleman who would die, came out with that incredibly weird essay on his site where he was like, yeah, my son from the future came back and told me that Muslims are going to ruin everything. And I was massively pregnant when I read that. I was like, what? What are you doing? It's like my hormones were in the uproar. I phoned my husband up and I was like, why is Dan Simmons scaring me about the future? But yeah, but worse than that, like it was as though your wonderful uncle had turned out to be insane.
Yeah.
You hadn't noticed.
It's that moment where you're
And you
like,
cannot.
stop the planet, I want to get off.
No.
No, wait a minute, I like this planet, you get off.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you can't get away from either thing about him.
Yeah.
You can't get away from the fact that Dan Simmons is an incredible writer and really one of the best writers of contemporary horror that I can think of. And you can't get away from the fact that he's an anti-Muslim nutcase.
Yes. On the other hand, getting back to Chris and Orson Scott Card, just because he's an example that I know. One of the things, and maybe to take as a positive, I mean, many of us know him, we read him. I loved Ender's Game. It was, at the time when I read it, it was shocking and it was different and it was powerful.
Yeah.
So to, a decade later, realize that he's a frothy, insane person can be kind of devastating. But at the same token, realizing that however much I love that book didn't affect me, didn't make me a frothy, insane person. There's a little bit of liberation in that.
Well, and the nice thing is that it's like you said, galvanizing. The conversation is going to be forced.
Yeah.
And even
You can't avoid it anymore.
in my day job, somebody said something about we were talking, and one of my colleagues said something about, ooh, the new Ender's Game film, and are you excited about it? And I was like, I don't want to give that insane person a red cent, even if it is just his green lighting fee off the film. And my coworker went, what? Why? And I said, oh, he's a frothy, crazy person. Let me explain this to you. And
Frothy, homophobic.
Yes,
Perhaps we should stop saying
You're
that.
right.
Because A, that kind of lets him off, and B,
Yes.
it's an insult to people who
actually have.
yes,
Right.
sorry, you're right. But it was interesting because then there was a conversation. There was a space open where I could talk with my coworker and say, no, let's address this issue between the two of us. Let's not, fight, but let's talk about it. And he walked away going, oh, that's really interesting. That's something I wouldn't have thought about. And he actually said, you think for a science fiction writer, he'd be a little, less narrow. And I was like, oh.
This is always the question, and somebody who's in this room actually quite rightly said, I don't understand why you would create a fantasy analog world or a vision of the future and make it exactly the same in terms of what is presumed to be the default of social strata and people's attitudes towards things. And so why create a fantasy world that has rampant homophobia? Just because, well, hey-ho, in life, rampant homophobia. Well, yeah, but on the other hand,
Lazy storytelling.
yeah, exactly. There's an argument to be made that perhaps if you don't want to have that in your fantasy world, you don't have to.
Yeah.
Well, and then that brings up questions of what is it that they want to have and what is it they want to address. Do you guys feel, and I like that people have been talking about different mediums, not just the mediums that you work in, but also you're bringing up TV. And if you are gamers, please feel free to address that. I am not, so I'm very unaware of that world. But do you guys feel that there are specific issues that are being addressed more than others? Or perhaps a different way, are there issues that are trending in comics or in books or on TV?
I think in video games, something, again, I don't play, but I'm friends with Leah McKay, if anybody knows her from Sock, and she is an absolute, I'm trying to think of how I wouldn't say that she consumes video games, I think she swallows them like a duck. She loves video games, so everything I know from her, and her big excitement, and I think one of the big trends is this sort of, the protagonists that you can choose what gender they're going to be or what sex they're going to be and where they're romantically aligned, and this idea of having a character who's completely gender fluid the minute you meet them, I find fantastic. And it seems to me, and maybe I'm mishearing this, but there seems to be 3 or 4 major titles that came out in the last 6 months where the character is either romantically queer or sexually queer or gender queer, and I find that really fantastic. Chris, what about you?
I can talk about gaming too, but I'll try and. I think the mainstream has just sort of started to clue into trans issues, which is what you're talking about with the genderqueer gaming stuff. The same thing is happening in comics, where in the last 3 months there have been 3 trans characters introduced in an ongoing series.
Yeah.
So this isn't a very special episode. This is a regular character who was introduced, and then this next piece of them was revealed, and then this next piece of them is going to be revealed. And some of the comics are good, and some of the comics are bad. That's actually the thing maybe that's the biggest that's the biggest trend that I'm noticing, is that and this is just comics, is that comics I feel is maybe 10 years behind the curve in terms of its politics, behind SF, and that's and so there's just this discovery now that just because you have queer characters or representation doesn't make a comic good. That's people are starting to clue into. Where I don't. It's tough because I actually work with some of the people that are doing the comics, but some of the comics are really bad. And there are people who are doing them, and maybe the handling of the queer characters isn't bad, and maybe it's actually really good, but it exists in a sort of an awful nightmare superhero universe that I don't want to read about, or participate in. So that's actually is the revelation going right now, is that people really are being open-minded about, in comics is mostly a straight white male boys club, unfortunately, and that even goes for both of the writers of Batwoman who've tackled the series, but they both are very inclusive and very forward-thinking. But and Batwoman's a great series. Like I think it's phenomenal. I just read the last 2 arcs in a row before coming here, just in case someone was a fan on the channel. I was a little behind, and yeah, it's great. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming out now where it's unfortunate that the nicest thing I can say about the comic is they handled the coming out really well. Like, it came out really well, but the art was terrible and the story was depressing. I don't want to read what happens next, trying to with this one well-handled character. So that's the biggest trend that I'm finding, is that, and the same thing in gaming too, where I've played a couple of games in the last, and not things that are immersive like Dragon Age or Mass Effect, which are some of the ones that have sort of the full range of options in terms of like who we fall in love with. But some of the smaller characters where it's like you can play this as a man or a woman and those choices will affect the story, and I think that's really interesting. It doesn't make the story good though, it just changes how people interact with the story. And like I said, I feel like that you guys have gone through that 10 years ago in your own careers, where it's like, oh, I can write about all these things, and my contemporaries can write about all these things, but maybe the work isn't there either.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the question. For me, the two things are always representation and inclusion.
Yeah.
And not putting people on the, I come from a film background, not that I, was like a massive ass filmmaker or anything like that, but I was a film critic, and I taught screenwriting, and I taught film history. And what you see is this sort of distinct pattern where there's no inclusivity in the mainstream, or very little inclusivity in the mainstream of queer characters, or they become special issues, it's very special episode type people, where it's like, and the big twist is this person is gay! Oh my god! And then you get a little further on and you begin to see some inclusivity, but it's only side characters, it's only supporting characters. And then you also start to see that strange thing where it's like, we have to make you the most boring gay person on the face of the earth because we don't want to offend gay people. So we can't make you a villain, and we can't make you a begin because otherwise people are going to be going, why is the gay guy the villain? It's like, why is being a lesbian make you bad? What's that about? And we can't give you sort of bad sides to your character. We can't give you weaknesses. We can't make you a full human being, because A, you're not the focus, because why would you be? And B, also, you're just there to support the people who actually are the focus. And B, we don't want to insult anybody. And I've been very happy over the last little while to just be cruising past stuff that I'm not even interested in, and suddenly going, oh wow, the highly ambiguous guy who is the right hand of the president on Scandal happens to be gay. He's an older dude who happens to be gay and has a not exactly hot young husband with whom he has issues, and those get handled just like he's another person in the story. And he's not a perfect guy by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. But on the other hand, that's a soap, so nobody's perfect. Let's face it, the main character is cheating with the President of the United States and fixing elections. And she's black. So, so it's sort of like they got over two things at one stone. So, and that's really, really pleasant to see. I think the next step is to get more main characters where gay is one part of their life. Where
they are
It's
not,
Gemma, hang on one second. Before you get into what, I want to hear what Jess has to say on this issue, and then we'll go into what we want next. Because what I'm asking now is that the trends that you see now, then I want to ask about what you would like to see. So let's just hear what Jess wants to see now.
What you are seeing. No, what you are seeing now.
Did you? I
Yeah,
thought we started
about-
with Chris this time.
No, we started with
I beg
with
pardon.
Jess,
That's
and then
okay.
we went to Chris, and then we went to me.
Okay, all right, then
Wait,
we
you
will
want
keep
to
going
s-
with you
okay.
because
All right.
that's the trends that you have been seeing.
Okay, so the trends that I have
Would
is
like to see.
all right.
Or you can also answer trends you would like to see less of.
Okay, trends that I'd like to see also. You know,
Yeah, if there's something that you feel is done, you're done with that and you're ready to move on, or
okay, all right. Anybody here watch Orphan Black? It's kind of brilliant, isn't it?
apparently
I'm
this
just
side
watching
watching Orson
Yeah, it's kind of an amazing show. Orphan Black, to cut a long story short, is a fairly brilliant show being produced by Temple Street Productions, which is a Canadian production team, and using money out of BBC America.
And space.
And space. And it is, this is really not giving much away. The main character is one of a series of clones. They are all played by the same person. Her name is Tatiana Maslany. She is brilliant. And she has a lot of supporting characters. And one of the things that I love about that show is that some of those supporting characters, including the ones that she's playing, are gay. And that's just the way it is because that's the way it is. Now, one of the best characters, however, in the show, aside from Tatiana, to the infinite power, is played by a dude named Jordan Gavaris, and he's her foster brother, Felix. And this character has gotten a lot of crap from, as far as I know, heterosexual members of the critical press, who are sort of like, so what about this guy Felix? He's just such a stereotype. Because, yeah, he's a young, twinky gay guy who dresses kind of goth and likes to go to clubs and seems to be supporting himself somewhat as a sex worker. Not completely, but, you know.
The other part's a drug.
The other person's a drug dealer. You know, it's like, and he's kind of slippery, and which makes sense because his foster sister is the kind of person who would cherry pick someone's identity if they killed themselves right in front of her and she happened to notice that they looked exactly like her.
Not a spoiler, it happens in the first
Yeah,
time.
it happens like in the first 10 minutes. You know, but I found it hilarious that this is the thing that they choose to focus on. And I'm like, oh, so you're not allowed to present as gay anymore. You're not allowed to present as what seems to be what some people might say is a parodic type of gayness or a over-the-top type of gayness. And I'm like, as Jordan Gavaris is, no, I know a lot of guys like that, and I'm fine with seeing them on my TV show.
That's actually
Particularly
Yeah.
when they are wonderful characters.
I'm
Multifoliated, really
over
interesting
inclusion.
characters.
I'm over inclusion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for inclusion, and that's really nice. I want more explicitly queer stories but I want them to be good, and I want them to make money for everybody who's involved with them. It's nice that Hollywood, and it's nice that the literary establishment is full of people who grew up in a different place and time now, and who are including gay characters, and who are even making lead gay characters, but I would like an explicitly queer story that was at the same level as the explicitly heterosexual stories that are being produced by mainstream media. And I'm really willing to go out like really far outside of mainstream media to find those stories, and I generally do. But yeah, I would like it so that people could make money telling the queer creators could make money telling their stories without having to alter or bend to the mainstream audience.
Absolutely.
And I think jumping away from just sort of the SFF a little bit, you can find that stuff in web series. That's what I love about web series so much, is because they're like, well, mainstream media is not going to give me the kind of story I want. I'll make it myself. We get Leslieville and Seeking Simone and Out with Dad, and I'm not even mentioning Happy's because I'm in it, but all these great stories. There's a lot of amazing queer stories happening in web series because the creators, the writers, they're going into pitch sessions, they're going to talk with networks, and networks are like, can you dial that back a little bit? And they're like, no. And I'm going to go make the thing myself.
Can I just ask, sorry, getting back to what Chris was saying, are they making money? Do you know?
Some
Or is
are,
it maybe
some
yet?
are, some aren't. I liken web series to community theater. You do it for the passion. You make as much money as you can to make it, and there's lots of wonderful funds and government tax credits and all this stuff, and Kickstarter and all of that stuff for it. And some people like Felicia Day are making money on it, and some people like Jason Lever with that are breaking even, and some people haven't been paying. But I do it for free anyway.